It's 3 in the morning. I know because I looked at my phone 4 times in the last hour. Every time I think I'm about to fall asleep, something pulls me back. Not a sound. Not a nightmare. Her. I keep seeing the way she looked at me when I open my eyes. I wasn't supposed to notice that. I wasn't supposed to notice anything about Laura Chen. That's literally what every single person at Peak Performance Gym told me when I started working there 3 months ago. Maya said it as a joke the first day. Just don't get too close to Laura. Priya said it like a warning. She's complicated. My trainer supervisor said it like a policy. Keep it professional. And I thought, okay, fine. I'm not here to make friends anyway. I'm here to rebuild. That's what I keep telling myself. I moved to Portland from Miami after everything fell apart. The job, the relationship, the version of me I'd spent 6 years carefully constructing. And I told myself this was a clean slate, a fresh start, no complications. Laura Chen was supposed to be background noise. She was supposed to be the woman I nodded at in the hallway and avoided during the staff meetings where she sat in the back corner like she owned the room and owed everyone nothing. She was not supposed to be the person holding me when I woke up on the floor of the women's locker room at 11:47 on a Tuesday morning. She was not supposed to be looking at me like that, like I was something that mattered. I keep telling myself I don't know what "like that" means. I keep telling myself I'm exhausted and dehydrated, and that I clearly hit my head when I fell. And that's why everything feels slightly sideways when I think about her. That's why I can still smell her shampoo, something clean and sharp, like cedar, and something I can't name. Hours later, lying in my own bed, staring at a ceiling I've only known for 3 months. I keep telling myself that what I felt when she said my name, quiet, careful, like she wasn't sure I was all the way back yet, was just relief. The relief of not being alone on a cold tile floor. That's all it was. That's what I'm still telling myself at 3 in the morning, with sleep nowhere in sight and her face everywhere I close my eyes. I'm going to tell you what happened. From the beginning, because I think I need to say it out loud to understand it myself. And because somewhere in the telling, I think I'm going to have to admit something I've been pretending not to feel since the day I walked through the glass doors of Peak Performance and saw a woman with dark eyes and absolutely no patience for anyone's nonsense leaning against the front desk like she'd been there longer than the building itself. This is the story of how I fainted at the gym, and how the person who caught me was the last person I should have wanted to catch me, and how nothing, absolutely nothing, has been the same since. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. I need to tell you about Miami first, not because Miami matters to this story the way Portland does, but because you need to understand the version of me that walked into Peak Performance Gym on a rainy October morning, carrying 2 duffel bags and a resume that listed 6 years of personal training experience and a certification I'd earned in a different life. I had been with Daniela for 4 years. We met at a fitness expo in Brickell when I was 26, and she was 28, and she had this laugh. This big, warm, rolling laugh that I heard across a crowded room and thought, I want to be near that forever. And for a while, I was. We shared an apartment in Wynwood, a rescue dog named Frida, a gym membership, 2 sets of friends that eventually became one, and a version of the future that included a house in the suburbs of somewhere quiet, and 2 kids, and enough money to stop worrying. It wasn't that Daniela was bad to me. She wasn't. She was just someone who knew exactly who she was, and I was someone who was still figuring it out, who kept figuring it out, year after year, layer after layer. And eventually the gap between her certainty and my searching became something neither of us could keep bridging. We broke up in August. I moved to Portland in September. I told myself I was choosing a city I'd always wanted to live in, with mountains and rain and coffee shops that smelled like cedar in winter. That was true, but I also moved because I needed to be somewhere that didn't know my face, somewhere that didn't have a memory of the woman I used to be. Peak Performance hired me because I had good experience, and I didn't ask for too much money, and I was available immediately. My supervisor was a woman named Denise. Organized, practical, efficient in the way of someone who had stopped being impressed by people's potential and started only caring about their output. She gave me a tour of the facility on my first morning, walking through the weight room and the cycling studio and the recovery lounge and the small cluster of private training rooms in the back. "Locker rooms are at the end of the hall," she said, pointing left. "Staff kitchen through that door. Main floor runs 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. You'll be on morning rotations for the first month while you learn the space." "Got it," I said. "Any questions?" "None yet." She nodded. Efficient. We walked back toward the front desk, and that's when I saw her for the first time. She was standing behind the juice bar, not working it, just leaning against the counter with her arms crossed and a water bottle in one hand, talking to someone I hadn't met yet. She was wearing black joggers and a dark gray hoodie with the sleeves pushed up to the elbows. Her hair was pulled back in a low ponytail, not styled, just contained. She was talking in a low, even voice about something that had clearly already frustrated her, and the person she was talking to, a younger woman with braids, who I later learned was Maya, was nodding with the expression of someone who had heard this before and agreed, but was also quietly hoping the conversation would end soon. I noticed her the way you notice something in the corner of the room that doesn't fit. Not beautiful in the obvious way. Not loud or soft or performing anything. Just present. Like the room had arranged itself slightly around where she was standing. I looked for exactly 1 second longer than I should have. Then Denise said something, and I looked away. "That's Laura Chen," Denise said, not looking toward the juice bar. Her voice was perfectly neutral. "She runs our rehabilitation and injury recovery programming. She's been here 5 years. She's excellent at what she does." "Good to know," I said. "She's also..." Denise paused for half a second. "Particular. Give her space to do her work, and she'll give you the same. Just don't take her parking spot." I almost smiled. "I don't have a car yet." "Then you're already ahead of the curve." That was the whole introduction. I didn't speak to Laura Chen for my first 2 weeks at Peak Performance. I saw her, of course. The gym wasn't that big. Our paths crossed in the staff kitchen, in the hallway between the training rooms, once in the locker room when she was leaving as I was coming in, and we did that doorway shuffle, and she said sorry without looking up from her phone, and I said, "No worries." And that was it. She had a reputation, and the reputation was specific. Maya told me the outline of it one afternoon when we were reorganizing resistance bands in the back storage room. "She's not mean," Maya said, with the careful precision of someone choosing words deliberately. "She's just not interested in wasting time. If you catch her on a good day, she's the most helpful person in this building. If you catch her on a bad day, what does a bad day look like? Silence. Lots of silence. She won't yell. She won't be rude. She just isn't there, even when she's standing right in front of you." "What's the silence about?" Maya shrugged. "Nobody really knows. She doesn't talk about her personal life, like at all. Some of the trainers have been here 3 years, and they still don't know anything about her outside this building." I filed that away. Priya added her own layer a few days later. Priya ran the cycling studio. High energy, fast talking, the kind of person who remembered everyone's name in the first 5 minutes. She liked Laura, I could tell, but the liking had the texture of admiration from a respectful distance. "She was in a relationship for a while," Priya said, lowering her voice slightly, even though we were alone in the lounge. "They broke up before I started. I don't know much about it. Just that after that, she kind of pulled in. Stopped coming to the staff things outside of work. Stopped talking about herself. She's fine. She's just private," I said. "Like, aggressively private." Priya smiled. which I respect, honestly. It's impressive. I don't have a single secret. You'll know everything about me by the end of the week. She was right. By Friday, I knew Priya's full romantic history, her complicated feelings about her mother, and her exact position on pineapple on pizza. Which was a firm yes, and she wasn't apologizing. I didn't learn anything new about Laura. I watched her, though. Not in a way I would have named at the time. Just, I noticed things. The way she set up her rehabilitation station every morning before clients arrived, each piece of equipment in an exact spot that she'd clearly decided on years ago. The way she talked to her clients, unhurried, precise, asking questions and then actually waiting for the answers instead of filling the silence. The way she ate her lunch alone at the small table by the window in the staff kitchen, with her phone face down and a book open next to her plate, and how the book was different every week, and how she always had a post-it note sticking out of the page she'd left off on, like she planned to come back. I noticed that she laughed rarely, and always quietly, as if laughter was something she kept close, not something she sent out into the room. I noticed that she knew every client by name, not just the names, their patterns, their hesitations, which exercises they avoided, and why. She noticed things about people that I had to work to notice. For her, it seemed involuntary. I noticed that when something frustrated her, a piece of equipment that wasn't returned to its place, a scheduling conflict, a meeting that ran long, her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Just for a second. And then she would smooth it back to neutral and keep moving. I didn't understand why I was cataloging all of this. I told myself it was just what I did with people who interested me professionally, that her approach to rehabilitation was different from what I'd learned, and I was paying attention because there was something to learn. That made sense. That was a reasonable explanation. I was not the kind of person who... I'm getting ahead of myself. The point is, in those first 2 weeks, Laura Chen was someone I watched from a distance and didn't approach and didn't think about in any way I would have needed to examine too closely. She was a coworker. She was private and particular and slightly unknowable, and that was completely fine. And then it was a Tuesday in late October, and I went for a run before my shift, and I forgot to eat breakfast. And apparently those two things together, combined with the fact that I hadn't slept well in 3 nights because I was still adjusting to a new city and a new apartment, and the specific quiet of a life without Frida padding around in the kitchen at dawn, apparently all of that together was enough. I made it to the locker room. I sat down on the bench to change my shoes, and then the lights did something strange, and the floor came up to meet me, and that was that. I don't remember falling. I remember the floor was cold, and I remember a voice, close, calm, saying my name like it was important that I heard it. Thais, I need you to stay with me. Can you open your eyes? I opened my eyes, and the first thing I saw was Laura Chen's face, about 8 inches from mine, watching me with an expression I'd never seen on her before. Not worry, exactly. Something steadier than worry. Something that looked like focus and care, and an almost frightening amount of presence. There you are, she said quietly. Like I'd been somewhere and come back. Don't try to sit up yet. I didn't try to sit up. I just looked at her. And something in my chest did something I didn't have a name for. I filed that too. And I told myself, lying on that cold tile floor with her hand on my shoulder and her eyes on my face, that I was filing it under post-fainting confusion and leaving it there. That's where it was supposed to stay. She stayed with me for 45 minutes. I want to tell you that objectively so you understand. 45 minutes on a Tuesday morning when she had a client at noon and a full afternoon schedule. She sent a text. I didn't see it happen, but Maya told me later that she rescheduled her 11 a.m. without any explanation, and nobody asked for one. And she sat on the bench next to where I was lying on the floor, and she kept her hand on my shoulder, and she talked to me in that low, even voice. She asked me when I'd last eaten. She asked if I'd had water. She asked if this had happened before, ever, or if this was new. She asked gently if I was under a lot of stress. I answered everything. I don't know why. I'm not normally a person who tells the truth to strangers when I'm horizontal on a floor. But there was something about the way she asked, not with sympathy that wanted to be thanked, not with concern that was looking for a story to repeat, just with the matter-of-fact attention of someone who actually needed the information. Skipped breakfast, ran too hard, haven't been sleeping well, she said when I was done. That's a lot of variables. Yeah, I said. Are you anemic? Borderline. She nodded like that confirmed something. You need to eat, today and every day, not optional. I know. You know and you forgot. I was distracted. What were you distracted by? I looked at the ceiling. New city, new job, a lot of things. She was quiet for a moment. Portland's a hard city to be new in, she said finally. People think it's friendly. It is, kind of, but it's friendly on the surface and it takes a long time to get underneath that. I turned my head to look at her. She was looking straight ahead, not at me. Her expression was neutral, but it was a different neutral than the one I'd been watching across staff meetings. More open, more tired. You're not from here? I said. I'm from Seattle. Close enough that I thought it would be easy. It wasn't. I didn't know what to say to that. So I didn't say anything. And she didn't seem to need me to. Eventually, she helped me sit up, slowly, and got me a granola bar from her bag. She had one, just there, like she always carried emergency snacks, and a bottle of water, and she sat with me while I ate it, and by the time I was done, I felt human again, mostly. I think you're good to stand, she said. Thank you, I said. Really? You didn't have to? I was in the locker room, she said. You were on the floor. What was I supposed to do? It was such a practical statement, so stripped of the performance of kindness, but it landed on me differently than it might have before I'd spent 45 minutes watching her be precisely, unhesitatingly present with a person she barely knew. I stood up. My legs were fine. Everything was fine. You should eat something real before your afternoon shift, she said. Not a granola bar. I will. And if you feel dizzy, sit down. Don't push through it. Okay. And sleep, Thais. She said my name again, that exact way. Just accurate, like she'd looked it up and practiced it and decided it mattered. I'll try, I said. She nodded, picked up her bag, walked to the door, and then she paused with her hand on the doorframe, her back to me just for a moment, and said, without turning around, "Welcome to Portland, by the way, officially," and then she was gone. I stood in the locker room for a little longer than necessary. I ate the granola bar wrapper. I told myself that was a perfectly normal interaction between two colleagues, and that Laura Chen was simply a competent professional who had responded appropriately to an emergency situation, and that the thing happening in my chest was gratitude and nothing else, and I should go eat lunch and come back for my afternoon clients and stop thinking about it. I went to eat lunch. I came back from my afternoon clients. I thought about it for the rest of the week. Not in a way I could articulate. Not in a way that I was willing to articulate, even to myself. Just, she was suddenly there, in my peripheral awareness, in a way she hadn't been before. I'd catch myself tracking where she was in the building without meaning to. I'd hear her voice in the hallway, and my attention would shift slightly in that direction. I'd see her at the juice bar in the morning, and something in me would do a small, involuntary thing that I refused to look at directly. It was recognition, I told myself. The brain cataloging someone who had been important to it in a moment of stress. Perfectly normal, neurologically documented. She brought me soup on Thursday. Just left it on the little table by my locker. A container of something that smelled like ginger and garlic, still warm, with a Post-it on top that said, "In case you forget lunch again." No signature. But there was only one person in that building who would have done it. I stood there holding the container for a moment that was embarrassingly long. Then I ate the soup. It was the best thing I'd had since I moved to Portland. I thought about thanking her. I spent 2 days planning how to thank her casually, in a way that wouldn't make it weird. I said thank you in the hallway on Friday, and she said no problem, without stopping walking, and it should have been fine. It was fine. I made it fine. But that night I lay in bed in my new apartment that still didn't feel like mine yet, listening to the rain on the window, because in Portland the rain is always on the window, and I thought about the 45 minutes she'd stayed with me on that floor, about the Post-it on the soup container, about the way she'd said my name, Thais. Not the American version flattened out, the real one, the one my mother used, the one that still made me feel like myself. I told myself she'd probably ask someone how to say it. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself a lot of things that week. None of them held. The shift happened slowly and then quickly, the way those things do. It started with coffee. The staff kitchen had a machine that made decent coffee and mediocre espresso, and I'd developed a morning routine around it. In at 6:15, coffee by 6:30, first client by 7. Simple. The kitchen was usually quiet that early, just me and whoever else had the opening shift. One morning in November, Laura was there. She looked up when I came in. Not startled, she never looks startled, just noting my presence the way she noted everything. "Morning," she said. "Morning," I said. I made my coffee. She poured hers into a thermos. We were in the kitchen for maybe 3 minutes in total. At the end of those 3 minutes, as she was screwing the cap onto her thermos, she said, "How are you sleeping?" I looked at her. "You look tired," she said. Not unkindly, just accurate. "I'm getting there," I said, still adjusting. "How long has it been?" "About 6 weeks now." She considered that. "It took me almost 3 months," she said, "to stop lying awake at 2 a.m. in a new apartment feeling like everything was slightly wrong." "Does it actually stop?" She almost smiled, just a small lift at one corner of her mouth. "Yeah," she said. "It stops." She picked up her thermos and walked out. I drank my coffee standing in the kitchen, alone, and I thought about her saying, "Yeah, it stops." The certainty in it, the quiet authority, like she was offering me something she'd hard-won herself, and I thought, I want to keep talking to her. Not about anything specific, not with any agenda. Just, I wanted more of whatever that was, that quality of her attention. The way she said things like they were true, rather than like she was hoping they'd be received well. I started paying attention to when she was in the kitchen. I hated that I started paying attention to when she was in the kitchen, but I did. I told myself it was companionable, that working in a new place was lonely, and it was natural to gravitate toward the person who'd been kind to you. That made complete sense. That was a completely unremarkable thing to do. By the 3rd week of November, we had coffee together in the kitchen every Tuesday and Thursday morning. Not by arrangement, just by the gravitational logic of 2 people who happened to share an early shift on those days, and had fallen into the habit of occupying the same space at the same time. She asked me questions. Real questions, not the social ones. Not, how are you settling in a way that expected fine as the answer. She asked what I'd trained for before, what my specialty was, what kind of client I liked working with best. She asked if I'd liked Miami, and I said yes and also no, and she didn't ask me to explain that, just waited, and so I explained it anyway. I'd been there 6 years, I said. It was good for a while, and then it was comfortable, and then comfortable started to feel like a trap. She was quiet for a moment. What kind of trap? The kind where you realize you've stopped making choices because you want them and started making them because they're easier than the alternative. She looked at me, not like she didn't understand, like she understood exactly and was deciding how much to say. "I know that trap," she said. And that was all. But she said it the way you say something that costs something, and I heard it that way. I want to tell you that I knew by then what was happening, that I had enough self-awareness to identify what was going on and name it clearly. I didn't. I really, genuinely didn't. Or maybe I did, in some part of myself that I had learned to keep very quiet. The part that had always been quiet, that I had never looked at directly, that I had spent 6 years not examining because examining it would have meant rearranging everything. What I knew was this. Every morning I worked a shift that overlapped with Laura's. I arrived earlier. Every conversation we had made the rest of the day brighter in a way I couldn't account for with any other variable. Every time she looked up and saw me in the room and just acknowledged me, with a nod or a word or nothing more than a slight adjustment in her expression that meant she'd registered I was there, something in me steadied, like I'd been slightly off balance and she was the thing I was bracing against. I told myself we were becoming friends. That was not a lie. We were becoming friends. That was entirely real. But it was also incomplete. It was the way you describe a coastline by talking only about the sand. True, technically, but missing the fact of the ocean entirely. Maya noticed. She didn't say anything directly, but I caught her watching the two of us in the staff kitchen one afternoon, with an expression that was somewhere between surprised and quietly entertained. When I looked at her, she looked down at her phone immediately. "What?" I said. "Nothing," she said. "Maya." I genuinely said nothing. "You were making a face." "I always make faces. It's my whole personality." I let it go. But I thought about her expression later that night, lying in bed with the rain on the window again, and I felt something shift in my chest that I chose, very deliberately, not to follow. Not yet. Not yet. There was something else I want to tell you, though. Something that happened in late November that I've been circling around because it's the moment where I can no longer claim I didn't know. Not really. We were both staying late one evening. Me, because I had a client whose session ran over. Her, because she had documentation to finish. The gym was mostly quiet. The last class of the night had ended. The front desk staff was wrapping up, and the main floor had the particular hushed quality of a large space with nobody in it. I'd finished with my client, and I was in the recovery lounge, rolling out my own shoulders when Laura came through. She saw me. "You're still here." My 6 o'clock ran over. "You." "Paperwork." She dropped into one of the chairs with the specific exhaustion of someone who has been dealing with administrative tasks for 2 hours too long. "I hate paperwork." "Then why do you do it so thoroughly?" She looked at me. "Because things fall apart when people don't do the paperwork." I almost laughed. "That's a very you answer." She raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" "It means you care about the structure, even when the structure is annoying." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Is that a criticism?" "No," I said. "Actually, no. I think I've spent most of my life doing the opposite, avoiding the structure, winging it, and it catches up with you eventually." She looked at me, long enough that I noticed. "What happened in Miami?" she said. It was quiet in the lounge, just the hum of the HVAC and the rain, always the rain, and the distant sound of someone closing the front door. I put down the foam roller. "I was with someone for 4 years, I said. "And it wasn't wrong exactly. She was a good person. We were good together in a lot of ways. But I think I was living in a version of myself that I'd built for the relationship. And when we ended, I had to figure out which parts of me were actually mine." She didn't say, "I'm sorry," or "that must have been hard." She just listened, and when I stopped, she said, "Are you figuring it out?" "Slowly," I said. "Being here helps. Portland. This place." I meant the gym. I mostly meant this, though. These conversations. She looked at me for a moment. That particular look, the one I'd been cataloging and refusing to name. "I'm glad you're here," she said, quietly. Not as a performance, just as a fact she'd decided to state. And I felt it land somewhere deep in my chest. We sat in the quiet lounge for another 20 minutes after that, not talking about anything important. She told me about a documentary she'd been watching about ocean ecosystems that had ruined her for the week. I told her about Frida, about how I missed having a dog, about how Portland seemed like a very good city for dogs and I was jealous of every person I saw walking one. She laughed at that. Actually laughed, not the small, controlled laugh I'd heard before, but a real one. Warm and slightly surprised, like it caught her off guard. I felt it like a gift. I drove home in the rain, and I turned the radio off, and I sat with the quiet, and I thought, I am in a lot of trouble. Not trouble in the way I meant it then. In the way I understand it now, lying awake at 3 a.m. It was a different kind of trouble entirely. The kind you don't climb out of. The kind that changes the terrain. December arrived. Portland in December is a city that has made peace with darkness. The nights come early. By 4 p.m, the sky is already doing something dramatic with purple and gray. And the rain shifts from intermittent to constant. And the city folds inward in a way that is either cozy or suffocating depending on the day and your particular state of mind. For me, December was both. Cozy because I was finally starting to feel like I lived there rather than like I was visiting. My apartment had begun to feel like mine. I'd gotten a few plants, a bookshelf, a kettle that I actually liked. I had regulars at the gym now, clients who greeted me by name and whose patterns I knew. And that familiarity had given me back a professional steadiness I hadn't realized I'd lost. Suffocating because of Laura. Let me be precise about what I mean. She hadn't done anything wrong. She was exactly the same. The same morning coffees on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The same directness. The same questions that went somewhere real. The same quiet, concentrated attention that felt, when it was pointed at me, like being the only thing in the room that mattered. Nothing had changed. I had changed. And the change had the specific character of something that had been happening for a while, and that I had been successfully not seeing. And then one day I saw it. All of it. At once. It happened on a Wednesday, not a Tuesday or a Thursday, not one of our coffee mornings. Just a Wednesday, which should have been like any other Wednesday. Except that I walked into the gym at 6:45 and Laura was already there on the main floor, working with a client. And she was demonstrating a shoulder mobility exercise with her arms raised, and the light was doing that particular gray morning thing through the high windows, and she said something to her client that made the woman laugh, and I stopped walking. Just stopped. In the middle of the main floor. For approximately 1 full second. And in that second, I understood something. I understood it the way you understand something that has been true for a long time, and that you have been carefully, deliberately, skillfully not understanding. I understood it, and then I walked into the training room and closed the door, and stood with my back against it for a moment, breathing. My client knocked on the door 30 seconds later. I opened it. I trained her for an hour. I was professional, and competent, and present. And the whole time, underneath all of that, something was rearranging itself inside me. Quietly, inexorably, like furniture being moved in a house while you're trying to sleep in it. You can feel it even when you can't see it. I have tried to explain this to myself in retrospect, and I find that words are not entirely adequate. It wasn't the first time I'd been attracted to someone. It wasn't the first time I'd felt something for a friend or someone close to me. I'd had moments before, Quick ones, passing ones I'd filed under general human appreciation for beauty and moved on from. This was not that. This was not passing. This had not been quick. This had been growing, quietly, and without my permission, for almost 2 months. And now that I could see it, I couldn't unsee it, and the size of it was alarming. It was the way she had stayed on that floor with me. It was the soup with the post-it. It was, it stops. Said with the authority of someone who'd come out the other side of something hard. It was the specific, particular sound of her saying my name. It was 20 minutes in a quiet lounge talking about ocean documentaries and missing a dog. It was the fact that when I imagined telling her something, anything, something funny that happened during a session, something I read, something that bothered me, I felt immediately the anticipation of her listening, of her taking it seriously without making it heavy, of the way she would look at me while I talked, like she was following the thread of everything I was saying and everything I wasn't saying. It was the fact that she was the person I wanted to tell things to, and I hadn't been the person who had someone I wanted to tell things to in a long time. I went home that Wednesday night, and I sat on my couch in the dark for an unreasonable amount of time without turning on any lights. I thought about Daniela, about how different this was from what Daniela and I had been, from the very beginning. How with Daniela it had been easy and warm and comfortable. How I had slid into that relationship the way you slide into something familiar, not because it was exactly right, but because it fit the shape of the life I was living. How I had never once, in 4 years, felt this specific weight of wanting to be near her. The thought was uncomfortable, in a way that went past discomfort into something I didn't know what to do with. I thought about what I had said to Laura in the lounge. I think I was living in a version of myself that I'd built for the relationship, and when we ended, I had to figure out which parts of me were actually mine. I thought, what if there are parts I haven't gotten to yet? I didn't sleep well that night. I didn't sleep well the next several nights. I started watching her differently. Not more than before. I had been watching her before. I just hadn't admitted it. But differently. Now I knew what I was watching for, even if I didn't know what to do with what I found. I watched her with her clients, and I noticed that she spoke to each one like they were the most important puzzle she'd encountered that day. Not fake warm, not performed care, genuine engagement with whoever was in front of her. She remembered things. She asked follow-up questions on things people had mentioned 2 sessions ago. One of her rehabilitation clients, a woman named Kay, who'd had a knee replacement, had a daughter who played soccer, and Laura asked about the girls' games every time Kay came in, remembered the team's name, once said congratulations when they made the playoffs as if she'd been tracking the season herself. She probably had been. That's the thing about Laura. She tracked things. She held information about people carefully, like it mattered. I watched her be frustrated with the equipment schedule one afternoon, when someone had booked the rehabilitation studio without clearing it with her first, and I watched her handle it. Not explosively, not passive-aggressively, but with the direct, controlled speech of someone who had learned that the quickest way through a problem was to name it clearly and propose a solution. No drama, no lingering resentment. Done. I watched her eat her lunch with her book, post-it marking her page, and I thought, she plans to come back. She always plans to come back. Every book, every conversation. She leaves herself a marker so she knows where she was. I thought about being someone's marker. And then I thought, stop that. Because here was the thing I hadn't said yet. The thing underneath all of this that I kept circling. She was my coworker. She was private and had pulled away from people after her last relationship, whatever that had been. She was someone that people described, gently, as complicated. And I was someone who had moved to Portland after a breakup that was still recent enough that I could feel its edges when I pressed. I was not in a position to want anything complicated. I was not in a position, frankly, to want anything from anyone. I was here to rebuild to figure out which parts of me were mine, to stop constructing versions of myself to fit into someone else's life. Getting attached to Laura Chen would be exactly the kind of thing I was supposed to be not doing. So I told myself to stop. I told myself that for approximately 10 days in a row. On the 11th day, she brought me coffee, not in the kitchen, to the training room where I was between clients, writing session notes. She knocked. She always knocked even though the door wasn't closed. And she held out a cup and said, "You had your morning coffee at 6, but it's now 11 and you look like you're running on fumes." I looked at the coffee. I looked at her. "How did you know what I take?" I said. "I pay attention," she said, simply. I took the coffee. Our fingers didn't touch. There was no reason for that to register as a loss, and yet something in me registered it anyway. "Thank you," I said. "You keep thanking me," she said, "because you keep doing things worth thanking." She looked at me for a moment, just a moment. "It's not a calculation," she said. "When I do things for you, I just..." She stopped, started again, differently. "I like that you're here, at this gym." I wasn't expecting to like it. I sat very still. "What do you mean?" I said. "New people disrupt the patterns," she said. "I don't usually like that, but you..." She looked at the window. Her jaw did that small tightening thing and then relaxed. "You don't disrupt, you just add something." I didn't know what to say. I was afraid of what I might say. "I like being here," I said, which was true and also enormous understatement. She nodded. "Good." She looked back at me. "Drink the coffee before it gets cold." She left. I held the coffee cup with both hands. Something in me was very loud and very still at the same time, which is a contradiction. But that's the only way I can describe it. Here is what I did not say. I did not say that I had been thinking about her constantly for 2 weeks. I did not say that I had started understanding something about myself that felt both new and completely obvious in retrospect, the way things do when you finally let yourself see them. I did not say that when she said, "I like that you're here." Something in me had taken that sentence and pressed it somewhere private, and planned to keep it there for a long time. I did not say any of this. I drank my coffee, and I kept not saying things. Christmas came and went. The gym closed for 2 days, which were the strangest 2 days I'd had in Portland. Too quiet, too much time alone in my apartment, nowhere to put myself. I called my mother on Christmas morning, and she talked for 40 minutes about my cousin's new baby and my aunt's renovations, and whether I was eating enough, and I said yes to all of it, and meant some of it. She asked if I was happy. I said I was getting there. She said, "Getting there is still movement, mija. Movement is good." I thought about that after we hung up. Movement. Was this movement? All of this, the new city, the new job, the slow reconstruction of a self I could actually recognize. Was this the right kind of movement? Or was I just walking in circles? I thought about Laura saying, "Yeah, it stops. 3 months. That's what it had taken her. It had been almost 3 months since I'd moved to Portland. Something was stopping, or starting. I couldn't tell which. Maybe they were the same thing. January brought something new to the calendar. A staff training day. Peak Performance did one every January. A full Saturday, 8 hours. Rotating workshops on client safety, new equipment protocols, nutrition counseling certifications, and an afternoon session on rehabilitation and injury prevention. The last session was run by Laura. I knew it was her workshop. I had been, in a very quiet way, both anticipating and dreading it for 2 weeks. She ran the room differently than I expected. She didn't stand at the front and lecture. She moved. She demonstrated on volunteers. She asked questions and waited for the answers in a way that made people think harder than they normally would because they knew she actually wanted what they came up with. She was funny in the dry, low-key way I'd seen in the kitchen, and the room relaxed around it without quite knowing why. And she was good. Really, remarkably good. Not just knowledgeable, grounded. The kind of grounded that comes from having done the thing for long enough that it lives in your body, not just your head. I was not the only person in that room noticing, but I think I was noticing differently. At one point she called on me. "Thais, since you've come from a background in performance training, what's your instinct on this?" And when I answered, she listened with that particular focused attention and then said, "That's right," and I'd add, and incorporated what I'd said into what she said next, giving it back to the room as part of the framework, not as credit, just as it fit, it belonged. I felt seen in a way that was almost painful. After the training day, a group of staff went to the bar down the street. Laura didn't come. I noticed, cataloged it, tried not to make it mean anything. I went, had a drink with Maya and Priya, talked about the workshop, talked about nothing, went home, lay in bed, thought about her face when she was explaining something she cared about, the way her eyes changed, more direct, more alive, the way she used her hands. I told myself to sleep. Sleep eventually came, but not before I'd spent a long time in the dark, pressing the weight of everything I hadn't said against the inside of my chest, trying to get a sense of its size. It was large. It was larger than I wanted, and it was getting heavier, not lighter, which meant that at some point I was going to have to either set it down or let it break something. I didn't know which one I was going to choose. I think, if I'm honest, I was hoping the choice would be made for me. Mid-January, a Tuesday morning, coffee. She was already at the machine when I arrived, and she handed me a cup when I came in, which she'd started doing, making mine while she made hers, since she always arrived a few minutes earlier and knew I was always exactly on time. Small thing. The kind of small thing that, accumulated over weeks, had become the texture of my days. We talked about a client of hers, not by name, of course, who was making slow progress on something that had been stagnant for months, and how she'd found an approach that was finally working, and I could hear in her voice what I'd learned to recognize as her version of quiet excitement. Precise, contained, but there, if you knew how to listen. "You love this," I said. She looked at me. "What?" "The work. Not just as a job, you actually love it." She considered that, like she was checking whether it was true before agreeing. "Yeah," she said. "I do. It took me a long time to trust that." "What do you mean?" She looked at her coffee. "When I started, I was trying to prove something. I think I still am sometimes. But it's different now. It feels less like performance and more like, this is actually who I am." I held my cup with both hands. I watched her profile. "I know that feeling," I said, "of trying to figure out where the performance ends and where you begin." She looked at me. Something in her expression shifted. Not dramatically, but the way light shifts when a cloud moves past the sun. "Yeah," she said. "I think you do." We were standing 3 feet apart in the staff kitchen on a Tuesday morning at 6:40, and the fluorescent lights were doing what fluorescent lights do, and it should have been completely unremarkable. It was not completely unremarkable. "Laura," I said. She waited. I almost said it. I stood there with the sentence right there, right at the front of my mouth, ready, and I thought about what it would do, what it would change, what I was even saying. I was not someone who... I didn't even fully know what I was. "Never mind," I said. She looked at me for a moment. Long enough that I thought she might push. She didn't. "Okay," she said. She picked up her thermos. She walked out. And I stood in the kitchen with the unsaid thing pressing against my ribs like something alive, something that didn't want to be kept anymore, and I thought, how long can I actually do this? But before we go further, if you made it this far, then you already know this feeling. Maybe not these exact circumstances, but you know what it's like to carry something inside of you that you're not ready to say out loud yet. Something that would change everything if you let it be real. If this story is touching something in you, do me a favor and hit that like button right now. It takes 2 seconds, and it tells me that stories like this are worth telling. And if you're not subscribed yet, do it now and turn on notifications, so YouTube can let you know when the next story comes out. They come out every week, and I don't want you to miss a single one. Now I need to ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where you knew what you were feeling deep down, but you couldn't say it yet? Where the truth was sitting right there in your chest and you just kept it there, day after day, because saying it felt like crossing a line you couldn't come back from? Tell me in the comments. Tell me your version of that. I read every single one. And tell me, where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop your city below and I'll heart every comment. Now, back to Thais. Because what happens next changes everything. February, the month I stopped pretending. It didn't happen dramatically. It didn't happen the way it does in stories, with a big moment and a swelling realization, and suddenly everything is clear. It happened the way most true things happen, in accumulation, pressure, and eventually the moment where the accumulation becomes too much and something gives. The accumulation. Weeks of coffee mornings where I chose my words carefully and hated myself a little for it. Weeks of noticing things about her, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, the specific sound of her moving through the rehabilitation space, the way she talked about her clients with such precise, unperformed care, and then not talking about noticing them. Weeks of never mind swallowed back down. She had started texting me. Small things. A link to an article about periodization training she thought I might find useful. A question about whether I'd seen something Denise had sent all staff. Once a photo of a dog she'd seen outside the gym with the message, "This one had the energy of someone's retired aunt." Thought of you. Which made me laugh out loud in my apartment at 9:30 on a Sunday night and think about how much I wanted her to be the one making me laugh in person. I texted back. Always. Immediately. I told myself it was normal to text back immediately. I chose not to examine the fact that my phone had never mattered less to me than in those months in Portland, except when it was her name on the screen. The pressure. Everything I wasn't saying, taking up more space than everything I was. The break. A Thursday night in February. Unexpected. There had been a pipe issue in part of the gym, which meant a section of the locker rooms was closed, and several sessions had to be rescheduled, and the building was quieter than normal by the time I finished my last client at 8. I was in the recovery lounge, writing notes, when I heard her in the hallway. "You're still here," she said, coming through the door. Same as before, that quiet noting of my presence. But she looked tired tonight, more tired than usual. "Pipe drama," I said. "I heard." She sat down on the couch across from me. Not in a chair, the couch, which she'd never done before. She dropped her bag on the floor and leaned back and closed her eyes for a moment. I looked at her. She looked exhausted, in a way that went past the physical. "Rough day?" I said. "Rough few days," she said, without opening her eyes. I waited. After a moment, she said, "I had a conversation with someone I thought I was done having conversations with. An old situation." She reached out. I kept my voice very even. "How are you feeling about it?" She opened her eyes, looked at the ceiling. Like I thought I'd built more distance than I had. Is that a bad thing? Finding out you hadn't? She thought about that. "I don't know yet." She looked at me. "Do you still think about your ex, Daniela?" The question surprised me by being easy to answer. Yes and no, I said. I think about the 4 years. I think about what I learned. I don't think about getting back. I paused. I think I'm more interested in what's in front of me than what's behind me, for the first time in a while. She looked at me. Something in her expression was careful. Careful the way it gets when someone is listening to more than just the words. What's in front of you? She said. My heart was doing something I was trying not to notice. A lot of things, I said. Good things. New things. Like this city, finally starting to feel like mine. Like the work, which I'd forgotten how much I loved. I stopped. She waited. She was good at waiting. Like people I didn't expect, I said. It was the most I'd said. The most honest, the most direct, the most forward. I said it, and then I looked at the notebook in my lap, and I stayed very still, waiting to see what she'd do with it. She was quiet for long enough that I thought she was going to let it pass. Then she said, Thais. I looked up. Her expression was, I don't have a precise word for it. Open. More open than I'd seen her. And underneath the openness, something that looked like both wanting and warning at the same time. I don't want to misread you, she said, carefully. You're not, I said, and my voice was steadier than I expected. She looked at me, for a long moment that I could feel in my whole body, and then she said, I was trying not to notice. Me too, I said. Another quiet. We work together, she said. I know. I don't do this easily, she said. I closed off a lot of things after the last time. I'm not sure I know how to open them back up. I'm not asking you to do anything, I said. And that was true. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have an agenda. I had just said the thing I'd been not saying. That was all. She looked away, at the window, at the dark outside, and the rain. What are you asking? She said. I thought about it. I'm asking you to let this be what it is, I said. Whatever that is. I'm still figuring things out. About myself. About what I want. About who I am, actually. Underneath all the versions I built for other situations. I paused. But I know that being near you makes me feel more like myself than I've felt in a long time. And that means something to me. She turned back from the window. Her expression had changed, softened in a way I'd only seen in glimpses before. The almost laugh, the one that caught her off guard. That's a lot to say, she said. I know. I've been not saying it for 2 months. She almost smiled. I noticed. Did you? I pay attention, she said. Same words as when she'd brought me the coffee, but different now, weighted differently. I looked at her. She looked at me. We sat in the quiet recovery lounge with the rain outside and the low hum of the building settling, and something passed between us that didn't need to be named yet. Something that had been building for months and that was finally acknowledged, seen, given the small but enormous permission of being seen. She didn't reach for my hand. I didn't reach for hers. We just held each other in our gaze for a moment that felt longer than it was, and something in it said, I see you. And me too. And this is real, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't anymore. I should go, she said, finally. Okay, I said. She picked up her bag, stood up. At the door, she paused. Different this time. She turned back fully and looked at me. The soup, she said. Back in October. I didn't leave it because you forgot to eat. I waited. I left it because I kept thinking about you on that floor, and I wanted to do something and I didn't know what else to do. She held my gaze for one more second. Then she walked out. I sat in the empty lounge and the building settled around me, and something in me that had been clenched and braced for a long time, without my knowing it, slowly began to loosen. What came next was not simple. I want to be clear about that, because I don't want to make it sound like the acknowledgement solved everything, like saying you're not misreading me was the key that unlocked a door, and on the other side was a clean, straight hallway. It wasn't. On the other side was a room full of things we both needed to figure out. We were careful with each other after that night. Careful in a way that was different from the careful of not saying things. This was the careful of two people who had said something real and were now deciding what to do with it. She texted me that Friday, "I've been thinking," which arrived while I was eating breakfast, a quiet Saturday morning, and I sat with my coffee and waited. "I'm not good at this," she said. I was for a while with someone, and then it ended badly and I pulled away from it, from the whole thing. I wrote, "What does pulling away look like for you?" She took a few minutes. Then, not letting things matter, staying close to work, keeping everything I felt inside a perimeter I controlled. I looked at my window. The rain, always the rain. Does the perimeter feel safe or does it feel like a cage? Long pause. "Both," she said. "Mostly cage lately." "That's honest," I said. "You make it easier to be honest," she said. "That's both good and terrifying." I held my phone and felt something warm and aching at once. "I'm terrified too," I wrote. "Of what? Of wanting something I don't fully understand yet. Of building a version of myself around someone again and losing track of where I end." "Yeah," she said. "That." We stayed in that honesty for a while. It was uncomfortable. It was also the realest exchange I'd had with anyone in longer than I wanted to count. Over the following weeks, we didn't rush anything. We didn't define anything. We kept having coffee on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, and now the mornings had a different quality, not less comfortable, more, the way a room feels different when something new has been brought into it. More alive, more itself. She came and found me one afternoon to show me something she'd read, an article about proprioception training, but she'd printed it and written in the margins, her handwriting small and precise, and she held it out to me without preamble and waited while I read her notes. I looked up and she was watching me with that open expression. "You annotate everything?" I said. "How else do you hold on to what matters?" I thought about post-it notes marking pages. I thought, I want to be someone she annotates. February became March. The days got longer. Portland started doing that thing it does in spring. Not fully committing, but sending early messages. A day here where the light stays until 6. A morning where the rain holds off and the sky goes a particular shade of blue that almost doesn't look like winter anymore. The mountains were clearer. Frida's kind of city, I thought. And then caught myself thinking it and felt the warmth and the ache together, the way good things that carry something else often feel. I was changing. I could feel it. Not the sudden, rupturing change of crisis, but the slower change of something growing toward what it needed. The version of me that had moved to Portland in September, guarded, reconstructed, performing a fresh start, was starting to give way to something less performed, something that felt more like actually being. Laura was part of that, a significant part, but not the only part. That matters. I was going to yoga on Saturday mornings now, which I'd never done before. I'd adopted a plant, a small, resilient succulent named Dolores who was thriving on my windowsill, and then a second plant, and a third. I'd started running again, properly, not the frantic, burned-out running of October, but the patient, rhythmic kind where you're moving because the movement is good, not because you're outrunning something. I'd called my mother more. I'd started keeping a journal, badly and inconsistently, but keeping it. I was, for the first time in a long time, in the process of becoming something rather than maintaining something. And then March brought something I hadn't anticipated. An email from Daniela. Not dramatic, not angry, just reaching out, checking in. She'd heard through a mutual friend that I was in Portland, and she hoped I was well, and she wanted me to know there were no hard feelings, only the genuine wish that I was finding what I needed. I read it 3 times. I thought about what to feel and found, to my surprise, something close to gratitude. Not for the relationship exactly, but for the clarity it had eventually forced. For the version of me that had ended it rather than stayed in something that fit wrong. For the space it had created that Portland had begun to fill with something I was still learning to name. I wrote back. Short. Genuine. I was well. I was finding things. I wished her the same. I closed the laptop. I sat with the quiet, and I thought, something is ending, and something is beginning, and both of those things are already happening, and there is nothing to do but be in them. I told Laura about the email the next morning. Not because I needed her advice, just because she was the person I told things to. She listened. She asked if it had been hard to read. I said not the way I expected, more like closing a chapter than reopening it. She nodded. Said, "That's what it feels like when you've actually processed something. It doesn't hurt the same way anymore. It just was." "Yeah," I said. "Exactly." She looked at me. "You sound better." "I feel better." "Than when you got here?" "Than in a long time, honestly." She held her coffee cup, looked at me with that expression. The one I'd learned was her particular version of warmth, not performed, just present. "Good," she said. I wanted to reach across the table and hold her hand. I didn't, but I thought it, and I let myself think it, which was new. Late March, a Saturday. She asked if I wanted to go for a walk. Not in the gym. Outside. Portland, spring trying harder now, the cherry trees doing their brief annual announcement. We walked along the river, talking about nothing and everything the way you do when the conversation is easy and you're not measuring it. She told me about her first year in Portland, how lost she'd been, how the city had felt like it was happening in a language she almost spoke. I told her about Miami in the last year, the specific flatness of days that should have meant something, and didn't. We walked for 2 hours. At one point, our shoulders touched when we moved to give room to a jogger, and neither of us immediately moved apart. And for approximately 30 steps, we walked that close together, and I was extremely aware of every single one of those steps. Then she shifted and the distance reopened, and we kept walking and kept talking, and I kept carrying the want of her like something warm and heavy in my chest. She walked me to my building. We stood on the sidewalk for a moment. "I'm glad we did this," I said. "Me too," she said. The way she said it, the way she looked at me before she turned to go. I stood outside my building until she was half a block away. Then I went upstairs. I sat on my couch with Dolores on the windowsill and the particular blue of a late March afternoon coming through the glass, and I thought, I am in love with her. Not in love like I'm ready to tell her everything and make it something and solve all the geometry of it. Just in love. The fact of it. The fact that had been growing since October, since the locker room floor, since the post-it on the soup, since, yeah, it stops, since I like that you're here, since all of it. I was in love with Laura Chen, and I was terrified. And I was also, underneath the terror, more myself than I'd been in years. Both of those things were true. Both of those things stayed true. April came in quietly. "I want to tell you about what happened, honestly," without making it prettier than it was, without making it uglier either. Just what it was. We had a conversation in the first week of April. Not the conversation I'd imagined, Not the one with the clear resolution and the clean conclusion. Just a real one. The kind that happens when two people who have been careful with each other for months finally stop being quite so careful. It started in the parking lot. The gym was closing for the night. We'd both worked late, her with a late rehabilitation session, me with paperwork that had gotten away from me. We walked out together, which happened sometimes now. The parking lot was almost empty. The air had that specific early April quality. Not quite warm, not quite cold. The kind of evening that can't decide what season it wants to be. She asked, "Where are you?" I knew what she meant. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I know what I feel. I don't know what to do with it." She nodded, like that was the right answer, or at least an honest one. "I've been trying to figure out something," she said. "Whether what I feel for you is the thing I think it is, or whether it's easier than that. Whether you're someone I feel safe with and I'm confusing that for something bigger." That landed on me. I sat with it. "Which do you think it is?" I said. She was quiet for a moment. "Both," she said. "I think it's both, and I'm not sure I know how to hold both at the same time without defaulting to one of them." "Which one do you default to?" She looked at me. "The safe one. The one I can keep without losing anything." I understood that. I understood it the way you understand something that also applies to you. "I do the same thing," I said. "I build versions of things that are less than what they could be, because less is safer." She exhaled. A long breath like something she'd been holding. "I'm not ready," she said. Not apologetically, just precisely. "I want to be. I don't know if that's the same thing." I thought about what I knew about her, about the relationship that had ended badly, about the years of walls and careful distance, about the perimeter she'd described, both safe and cage. "It's not the same thing," I said. "But it matters, that you want to be. Does it change anything?" I thought about that. "Yes," I said, "and also no." She waited. "It changes how I understand this," I said. "But it doesn't change what I feel, or what I need to do, I think." She looked at me. "Which is what?" she said. "This is the part that was hard to say. The part that costs the most when you say it honestly, instead of performing the version that sounds good." "I think," I said slowly, "that I came to Portland to figure out who I am without building around someone else. And I think I've been bending toward you in the way I do, not because you asked me to, just because it's what I know how to do." She was very still. "And that's bad?" she said. "It's not bad. It's just not done yet. I haven't finished becoming who I'm supposed to be without someone to define myself by." I paused. "And I think you need the same thing. Not me right now. You need to finish opening the things you closed." The parking lot was very quiet. "You're saying we shouldn't," she said. "I'm saying we can't do this right yet," I said. "Not because I don't want to. I want to. A lot. But I want it done right, more than I want it done fast." She looked at me for a long moment, and then something in her face did the thing I'd seen in glimpses. The openness, the real one, underneath all the careful. It stayed. It didn't retreat. "That's the most honest thing anyone's said to me in years," she said. "I practiced." She almost laughed, that real laugh, the warm, surprised one. And even then, even in that parking lot, it landed on me like a small private gift. "What happens now?" she said. "We're still us," I said. "Coffee on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You bring me things when I forget to take care of myself. I tell you things that are too honest for normal conversation. We stop pretending that's nothing, and we don't force it into something we're not ready to be. She was quiet for a moment. That sounds like a very mature approach, she said. Dry, but soft under it. I've been working on mature, I said. It's new. She looked at me. For a long moment, in the almost warm April air, with the parking lot lights doing what parking lot lights do, and the sound of the street one block over. Okay, she said. Okay? Okay. She picked up her bag. Good night, Thais. The way she said it. My name in her mouth, always exactly right. Good night, Laura, I said. She walked to her car. I watched her go. Then I stood in the parking lot, alone, with the specific kind of ache that comes not from loss but from loving something you've decided to hold carefully, rather than hold now. It was not the ache of giving up. It was the ache of choosing something that deserved the fullness of what you had to give. I drove home. I made tea. I sat by the window with Dolores in the city outside doing its April thing. And I cried. Not for long, but I cried. Because it was real, what had happened in that parking lot. Because she had looked at me with that open face and said, okay, and meant it with both the resignation and the not over yet. Because I had said the true thing instead of the easy thing, and that had cost me something in the short term that I believed, that I had to believe, would give me something back in the long run. Because I had, for the first time in my adult life, loved someone in a way that was entirely mine, not built for them, not constructed to fit. Just mine. My exact feeling, my exact want, shaped by who I actually was, and not by the version I'd been performing. That was the thing she'd given me. Not the relationship, the reflection. The first clear look at myself I'd had in a very long time. And I thought, sitting by the window at 10:30 on an April night with tea going cold in my hands, this is what I came here to find. Not her. Myself. But maybe myself through her. The weeks after that were quieter. Not cold. We were never cold with each other after that night. We were just resting, giving each other room. The coffee mornings continued. The texts continued. She sent me an article about plantar fascia rehabilitation, and I sent her a photo of a dog I saw outside a coffee shop. This one had very important business. No time for your nonsense. She sent back a single laugh emoji, which, from Laura, was the equivalent of a paragraph. She started opening up, a little more, in ways she hadn't before. Small things. Mentioning something her sister had said, a place she'd been years ago that she'd been thinking about, a book she'd loved that she thought I might love too. Each small thing was a drawer being opened a little more. I could feel it. She was practicing. I was practicing too. I joined a running group, something I'd been thinking about for months and kept not doing. I went twice a week and talked to people whose names I eventually learned, and by May I had plans outside the gym with people who weren't Laura, which sounds like nothing, and was actually significant. I called my mother more. I told her, in the way you can tell your mother things when you're brave enough, that I was figuring something out about myself that I hadn't had words for before. She didn't ask what. She said, "Then keep figuring. I'll be here." May. The cherry trees were done, and the roses were starting, and Portland had fully committed to being a different city. Greener, lighter, the kind of city you could see had been worth moving to. She brought me coffee on a Thursday morning, and we talked for 40 minutes about nothing in particular, which was the longest we'd gone without talking about anything real, and it was easy. Comfortable in the good way, not the trapped way. When she left, she paused at the door. "Thais," she said. I looked up. "I just wanted to say..." She stopped, started differently. "I'm glad we did it the way we did. The way you said we should." "Yeah?" I said. "Yeah." She looked at me. "I'm better than I was. I don't know if you can tell." I looked at her. I could tell. The way her jaw did that small tightening thing less often. The way she'd started coming to the staff Friday drinks once a month, briefly, just to show up. The way she moved through the space with something that was slightly less braced. Like she'd put down something she'd been carrying and was noticing that her shoulders were lower. "I can tell," I said. She nodded. Something in her eyes. "Okay," she said. "Good." She walked out, and I sat with my coffee in the morning light and Dolores, who had come to work with me once and charmed everyone, including Laura, who had held her for a full 5 minutes while doing something that looked a lot like smiling. And I thought, this is not the end. It's not the beginning either. It's the place where both of those things are true at once, and you learn to live in it. And I realized, slowly, imperfectly, not without grief, okay with that. More than okay. I was grateful. A few months after that parking lot conversation, I looked in the mirror on a Tuesday morning, gym bag on my shoulder, coffee in my hand, a city outside my window that finally felt like mine, and I recognized the person looking back at me. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough to know that the process of becoming yourself doesn't end neatly. It keeps going. It has its own seasons. And the people who help you find your shape aren't always the ones who end up holding it permanently. Sometimes they're the ones who teach you that your shape was always yours to hold. Laura taught me that. Not by staying. Not by going. By being exactly who she was, clearly and without performance, until I had no choice but to start doing the same. The soup with the Post-it. It stops. The 45 minutes on a cold tile floor. The parking lot. All of it. I won't tell you it didn't hurt. It hurt the way true things hurt. Not because they're wrong, but because they matter. If this story touched something in you, something you've been carrying quietly, something you haven't said yet, write "so date" in the comments. That word holds everything this story held. I'll know you made it here with me. And if you want to keep going, keep feeling this. The next story is on the screen right now. Go, a big hug. And I'll see you in the next one. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description.